As we settle into our chairs, so as people continue to settle, I'll go back to a quick question I had asked in the session right before lunch, which was, imagine it's the year 2045. You have picked up, oh well, newspapers will be obsolete by then. You have opened your digital platform to your trusted news source and seen a climate article. What's the headline? Who wants to volunteer? Please.
Fossil fuel companies go bankrupt. Fossil fuel companies go bankrupt.
Fossil fuel companies go bankrupt. How many cheers for that? Okay. What other headlines do you see? 2045.
The world lives without energy.
The world lives without energy. Interesting. Okay.
There's a beachfront property in Rwanda for sale.
Wow. Property in Rwanda for sale. So what has happened to the countries between? Okay, that's someone else, please, from the back, from the back. What headline are you seeing in 2045? Coffee?
Oh, not we are consulting.
Consulting. What headline are you seeing in 2045?
New species being discovered somewhere along the lakes of Lake Victoria.
New species found in Lake Victoria. Another comment here. Okay. Oh, here.
The world is just tired and nobody is using their cell phones when they are meeting.
No cell phones in 2045. Interesting. Okay. I'll take a few more. Few more.
Okay, Africa goes back to indigenous level.
A brilliant one. Africa goes back to indigenous knowledge. Okay.
Connect to Wi-Fi via the solar rays. Connect to Wi-Fi using the solar rays.
Connect Wi-Fi using solar in 2045. Interesting. All right. So as we move into the next panel discussion for the afternoon, it's also worth thinking about time and history as us being active participants in them. 2045 seems like a long time away, but so did 2025 at a point. Those who remember the turn of the millennium, 2025 might have seemed far away. So how will the conversations, the networks, and the interactions we have today shape that headline that you have just said you look forward to seeing in 2045? All right, so without further ado, I'd like to move into the first session in the afternoon, which is Building Resilience for Climate-Related Migration. Our panelists, Samuel Ni Ade Kojo, Provost, College of Education, University of Ghana. Welcome to the stage. A round of applause, please. Carola Suarez Orozco, Professor in Residence and Director, Immigration Initiative, Harvard University. Welcome. Fona Foreman, Professor of Political Science and Founding Director of the Center on Global Justice at the University of California, San Diego. Welcome. Romanus Opio, Program Leader for Sustainable Urbanization, Stockholm Environment Institute, Africa Center. Welcome. Okay. And our esteemed moderator, Marcelo Suarez Orozco, Counsel at the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. Over to you, sir.
Sorry. We are the penultimate session. It has been a marathon, but you are with us. And you know, I live in Boston, and every year they have a big marathon. And every year something happens. The Kenyans win all the races. So I am so delighted to be here to introduce and converse with our esteemed colleagues in our panel. A few reflections. Migration is a shared human condition. Migration is constitutive of humanity. Migrations are written in our genome and encoded in our bodies, in our bipedalism, in our stereoscopic vision, in our central nervous system. Modern humans are the children of migration. Human migrations are complex and multi-determined. They elude simplistic, mechanistic models of causality. They elude simplistic mechanisms of causality because they unfold in complex ecologies involving demographic asymmetries, economy and society, cultural practices, and historical relationships. War and terror and unchecked climate change remain the dastardly drivers of involuntary mass migrations in our era. At the distal level, immigration is multiply determined by labor markets, demographic imbalances, wage differentials, technological change, the environment itself, war, and terror. However, in the ground, the family makes migration work. Migration is an ethical act and for the family. The broad fixtures of large-scale migration over the last 100 years can be divided into very distinct chapters involving labor, involving family reunification, involving the rise of the second generation, the children of migrants in cities and countries around the world. We now turn to our panelists. If we take our definition of immigration as an ethical act of and for the family, and if the conceptual framework that places the family, it's defined differently according to kinship and social organization, social structure, culture, but the unit that drives migration worldwide is the family. Immigration begins with the family, and immigration is completed several decades later by a family that is transformed by the process of immigration. We now have, each table should have the data and a conceptual framing that flows from our summit in the Vatican City. For your review, to consult It has the data and some conceptual framing of the different typologies of migration, of course, including forced migrations and climate-related migrations. With that, I'm now going to turn to our STEAM panel. And we have a wonderful balance here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 continents. We have our brothers from Africa. We have Switzerland with Garola. We have the United States with Fauna, Kenya. And we have Latin America with yours truly, from the land of Argentina. And Madam Minister, I think that we have a good balance, right? You approve? Excellent. I'm going to start with Professor Samuel Kojo, Provost of the College of Education and the University of Ghana. Provost, let's begin with you. Briefly, share with us the changing issues in the migration of nomadic populations, with a focus on your research with the Fulani in West Africa.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Section, can I be heard? Okay. So let me also add my voice in expressing my appreciation to the organizers for having me here, and also especially to Professor von Braun, who was very instrumental in my funding for my PhD work. I'm very grateful. Well, so maybe, yeah, I think he deserves a round. Yeah. So what I'll be talking to you about the work is, in fact, the work I did with one of my students who happens to be a military general in the Ghana Armed Forces, and who was at the University of Ghana's Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. Now, these nomadic herdsmen, as we will normally term them as Fulanis in West Africa, this phenomenon is something that is not new. In geography, it's called transhumance. It's something that has been happening since time immemorial. But the issue now with it is becoming more rampant because of course, accelerating climate change, which is marked by prolonged droughts, erratic rainfall, and increasing land degradation. So these headers, mostly from the Sahel regions, these are happening in Nigeria, in Sudan, Togo, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast. In fact, if you take the whole of the Sahelian region, these migrants who are coming down south with their cattle, for grazing land because of the conditions that I've discussed above. Now it's becoming more pronounced because, as we all know, climate change is, is becoming increasingly an issue. So there are emerging issues as far as this migration, or if you want to call it mobility, is concerned. In the beginning, you have these herders who will travel down with their cattle for many days, down south. They used to come to the transitional zones of Ghana. Now, even some are entering the forest zones. Now, with time, they have transformed themselves because, as I said, they are also evolving because of the changes in the conditions. To the extent that now we have what we can term as 3 distinct groups of these Fulani. So you have the nomads, that continue to do the trekking down south. Then strategically, you have another group that is now referred to as the sedentary Fulanis. What they have done is they have located themselves in some of the communities that they travel along. So if you visit some of the communities, for example, in the Afram Plains of Ghana, you will see them, these Fulani families that are, they've established their communities at the outskirts of, where the main communities are. So that's and you have a number of them. These are the sedentary type. And then increasingly, you have the final group that is now described more as in the literature as the urban Fulanis. So there's this group that has also moved on and now have settled in peri-urban areas, but you find them also in urban areas. If you drive in Accra, you shouldn't be surprised if you are hit with this nuisance where you have to stop your car because there are cattle that are crossing the road, and in some cases, very major highways. This is what it has become. Most of what is documented about these Fulani herders in the literature is mainly about the conflicts that they've had with communities. Because as they travel, they pay no respect to where they go. So their cows, the herds do trample on people's crops, and they do destroy crops and people's farms. And that has resulted in a lot of conflict. That has been documented a lot in literature. Now, what we sought to do in this study is to look at what the new emerging issues are and what kinds of practices are they having in terms of how they adapt to some of these situations. So I'll briefly mention some peculiar challenges you have with these three groups, and then I will stop there. So if you take the nomads, okay, so the ones that are still going up and down, the challenges they have is reduced rainfall and drying water bodies along the areas they used to go. And so this has forced them now to travel greater distances to look for access to water. There's also the issue of heightened disease susceptibility in the cattle, due to prolonged mobility. There are issues of heat stress and limited access to veterinary services. If you take the sedentary group that are living now close at the outskirts of some of these communities, their main issue is conflict with the communities they live with. And so they've made attempts to try and integrate with some of these communities. And finally, when you take the urban ones, now, the peculiar challenge they are having is they are causing a lot of distraction to people's property in the urban areas, as I spoke about the nuisance in the traffic situations. And, they also depend on ponds and streams in these peri-urban areas for, water for their cattle. And unfortunately, many of these sources have been drained or built up to make way for residential development. So they are facing high cost of purchasing water. I'd like to conclude that one issue that has always been in contention is the ownership of these cattle. And I'm talking about huge herds of cattle. You have on the average a Fulani having close to 50, in some cases over 200 cattle they are moving with. The issue is, who are the owners of these cattle? And this has come up because it is believed that there are very powerful forces that are behind this. And so we need to look at what could be some of the issue is not to have conflict with them, because as far as some of us are concerned, this is a phenomenon that has come to stay. So we should now try to look at opportunities as to how they can be integrated. And those are some thoughts I can share later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Provost. Transhumanism is an ancient migratory adaptation, and I very much welcome your framing of both the contexts and the conflicts that these old patterns of transhumanism are creating in multiple settings. So to Carola, if we take this idea that immigration is an ethical act of and for the family, of course, the family, children become a sharp focus of the research. When I was a professor at Harvard, I used to have a lot of exchanges with the former president of Harvard, Larry Summers, became the Secretary of the Treasury. Because Summers saw, like most scholars, see immigration as a labor, as an economic matter. And my position is, it's not labor, it's families. You know, in Spanish, in the Mexican case, the largest migratory flow in the history of the world, by the way, Mexico to the United States, we talk about the Veracero program. Hands, arms, workers. It's human beings, it's families. Redefining migration and centering away from labor to the family opens conceptually an entirely different world. So Carola, please share the impact of climate change and how it's uniquely impacting children. And given these profound impacts, what practical policy measures do you recommend to ensure that children's needs and voices are truly centered in climate resilience, planning, and implementation here in Kenya, in Africa, in South America, around the world?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be part of this conversation. In 2021, UNICEF revealed through its climate risk index, Children's Climate Risk Index, that nearly 1 billion children, which is about nearly half the world's child population, live in countries of extremely high risk of climate impacts. Children growing up in the metaphorical global south, including here in Kenya and across East Africa, are amongst the most vulnerable. Children's developing bodies and minds make them most especially susceptible to the harms of climate change. Their health, nutrition, education, and psychological well-being are all at risk. Yet, as UNICEF has warned, their plight is too often overlooked in climate adaptation planning and funding, and a reality that constitutes what they've termed a children's rights crisis. Here in Kenya and across East Africa, climate change is reshaping childhood. 95% of Kenya's land is arid and semi-arid, and over 16 million children in the region experience water stress. Prolonged droughts, such as those in Turkana County, have led to acute malnutrition rates that exceed 40% among children under 5. Recent floods in Kenya have displaced hundreds of thousands, triggered outbreaks of waterborne diseases like cholera, destroyed more than 120 schools, and left over 300,000 children out of education. Rising temperatures expand the range of malaria carrying mosquitoes, pushing malaria into highland areas and increasing child mortality. Climate shocks have quadrupled the number of people facing hunger in Africa over recent decades, with children most affected by shortages and malnutrition. Climate-driven displacement is a harsh reality. According to the International Organization for Migration, between 2020 and 2023, drought alone displaced 2.7 million children across Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. Displaced children face physical risks from hazardous journeys and overcrowded camps, high rates of infectious diseases and malnutrition, interrupted education, with girls especially at risk due to increased caregiving and water fetching burdens, and profound psychological distress, including trauma, anxiety, and depression. It is important to note that these children are eco-migrants, but international, and this is very important to note, international law does not recognize them as refugees, leaving them without adequate legal protections. And as my psychologist colleague, Ivy Muruji, noted today, children these children face especially psychological challenges. Even children who are not directly displaced or disrupted are deeply affected by climate shocks and climate changes. A recent University of Nairobi study found that 68% of Kenyan youth aged 12 to 18 report climate despair, echoing global findings that youth are more anxious about the future than their elders. In short, the evidence is clear. Children bear the brunt of climate impacts, from drought and displacement to disease and despair. Policies and practices, planning and investments must place children at the center of climate resilience strategies. We must invest in their health, education, and agency, ensuring a more livable and just future for all. Now, what can we do? Addressing these challenges requires fundamentally reimagining how we approach climate resilience with children at the center. Child-centered resilience planning must recognize that children's needs during climate events are distinct and urgent. Health and social services need specialized protocols for rapid and slow onset climate events. Policy frameworks must explicitly protect children's rights within climate action. The allocation of 30% of county climate fund resources to child-focused programs represents progress, but we need a comprehensive child-sensitive disaster risk reduction framework that addresses everything from evacuation procedures to first aid protocols, designed specifically for young people. Educational innovation and investments represent another critical pathway. Implementation of mobile schools to reach regions impacted by climate shock is one short-term strategy. Providing climate science education in developmentally appropriate and engaging ways is a longer-term essential strategy to help children understand that the changing environmental, their changing environment while developing problem-solving skills for an uncertain future. But I also want to note that we need to recognize that displaced children, though their families often wish to return home, do not return home. Many children who have been displaced will grow up in their countries of displacement. And so we need to really think about addressing that reality and begin to embrace these children as our children, not their children. In many countries, these children are not, their educational needs are not addressed. And the reality is that most of these children will stay and become adults in their receiving countries. So this is something that I really want to underline. We need to face this, and children who have not been educated will not do well in their new societies. So it's good for them, but it's also good for their societies. Mental health support should not remain an afterthought. We must acknowledge that climate anxiety among children is a predictable and treatable consequence of environmental. This requires training teachers, educational workers, and community leaders to recognize and respond to climate-related psychological distress while building children's emotional resilience through age-appropriate interventions. Finally, We must recognize and amplify youth agency as we have been doing in the last 2 days. Kenyan young people are already leading transformative climate action through initiatives like the Miti Alliance reforestation efforts, where school clubs have planted over 1.2 million trees, and the Kilifi Solar Sisters engineering teams building solar dehydrators to reduce post-harvest losses. These examples demonstrate that children are not merely victims of climate change, but powerful agents of resilience and hope, given the opportunity, resources, and platforms to contribute to solutions. The path forward requires recognizing that climate resilience and child resilience are inseparable. When we invest in children's health, education, protection, and agency with our climate strategies, we must not only address immediate resilience, but also the foundation of a generation capable of creating a more sustainable and just future. Thank you.
Thank you, Carola. We now turn to the most trafficked, the most crossed border in the world, the border between Mexico and the United States. Professor Foreman, can you please share with us how increasing climate displacement is impacting, from your research, human mobility? And more importantly, can you highlight, given your scholarly work on agricultural instability, forced displacement, and housing in Central America and the United States-Mexico border? Where are we and where are we need to be?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and I have to say, I feel like a pupil here. I'm learning so much, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to learn. I work on climate-induced migration at the U.S.-Mexico border. I live in San Diego, just a few miles from the border. When I was listening to Carola's talk and thinking about Cardinal Turkson's words on the first day, perhaps there's no issue in the resilience space that demands urgent care than our response to displaced populations, and particularly to children. Obviously, the crisis will intensify in the years to come. The IOM predicts as many as 1 billion climate migrants by mid-century. So this is not a problem that's going away. I want to share a local model of care and responsiveness at the US-Mexico border, where I live and work. Of course, the project is a product of context and unique dynamics, as any project is. So this isn't about, direct applicability, but the project embodies a range of localized principles that have animated our conversation over the last 2 days. So I'd like to share it with you. So briefly, a little bit about context. Obviously, migration numbers to the US right now are down, a function of the recent federal elections, the suspension of asylum policies, and so forth. But in time, climate change will reignite the flows northbound. And, conventionally, northward migration in that part of the world is understood as a function of violence and poverty. And this remains true, but as we all know, climate change is a force multiplier, right, that accelerates conventional drivers of northward migration in our region. 72% of arrivals at the US southern border are workers in the agricultural sector. And historically, we've seen 70% more migration from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras when local growing seasons are drier. So agricultural instability is a major push factor in our region, under-recognized, as it is here in yours. And of course, these people are not classified formally as refugees, so they're not entitled to any formal protection under the Geneva Convention. So what this means is that Mexican border cities like Tijuana, where I work, or Ciudad Juarez, will be increasingly squeezed between northward migration pressure from the south and increased border control and closure from the north. And you know, this is a global story: trauma, movement, obstruction, and re-traumatization. So listening to Director Mamadou from UNHCR on the double slap is something that we witness again and again in our region as well. Additionally, as Mamadou emphasized, there's intensifying conflict everywhere between the movement of people and the impacts on vital ecosystems. And in San Diego, Tijuana, we are also witnessing deforestation, significant biodiversity loss, groundwater contamination, and a whole host of other ecological impacts. But of course, and there's some strange perverse hope in this, borders are unrelentingly porous places. So what happens in Mexico impacts the United States and other border states like mine. Air, water, waste, disease, these things don't stop at walls, even big, beautiful ones like ours. But as I said, there's great strategic value in this fact for those of us seeking to motivate ecological protection in the border zone. Finding common ground, very literally common ground for nature and people, is our priority in the Center on Global Justice at the University of California, San Diego. We're a team of social scientists, architects, urbanists, ecologists, public researchers, and artists. And we partner closely with border communities to build spaces of dignity and sanctuary for nature and people on both sides of the wall. One of these spaces is a migrant sanctuary at the edge of Tijuana that has now become the largest sanctuary in the entire US-Mexico border region. It's also the only shelter in the region that's centrally dedicated to ecosystem protection. We call it a sanctuary neighborhood. So let me very briefly describe the project and our process. So tens of thousands of migrants have settled in the informal canyon settlements at the edges of Tijuana. We work in the Los Laureles Canyon, which has become home now to 100,000 people. The canyon is impacted by dump sites, drastic erosion, landslides, and much of the trash and sediment is sort of discharged northward into the US through very intelligent sewage drains that US Homeland Security carved into the wall between the two countries, and it's discharged into the Pacific Ocean through southern San Diego County. So it's a hot mess, and it illustrates powerfully the sort of impacts of human migration on the health of binational ecosystems. And this is not only true in our region, we see these kind of binational impacts in border zones across the world. So a coalition of nonprofits, universities, state and municipal agencies are collaborating to protect these vulnerable ecologies on both sides, parcel by parcel. Now, the sanctuary that I mentioned is located in one of these conservation islands. It's a partnership with Embajadores de Jesus, a Christian organization that built a small camp for Central American and Haitian refugees navigating prolonged asylum processes in the US and Mexico. So several years ago, we joined forces to increase shelter capacity. When completed in 18 months, the site will accommodate 5,000 people through a combination of dormitory spaces and family units. We're also healing the topography with reforestation, bioswales, hydrofiltration, and terracing. We want to demonstrate that migrant housing doesn't have to destroy, but actually can help restore local habitat. So the project has gotten a lot of attention because of its focus on longer-term habitation and integration into the local host community, which happens to be a larger informal settlement. So we're moving beyond the transitory refugee camp model, and it's rooted in social capital. Residents participate directly in shared governance and daily operations, bookkeeping, gardening, cooking, maintenance, security, and education. The site includes a hydroponics farm and vocational training. and a resident-owned construction cooperative. We're not replacing the essential role of international agencies or governments or the private sector. We work with UNHCR, local governments, and the business community. Like 2 more minutes. But we model a scalable, community-driven, more cost-effective neighborhood scale alternative led by a public university. Just to conclude, the model illuminates 5 quick priorities that sort of emerge from our conversations here. It's deeply local, where the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor is seen with one's eyes and felt with one's hearts, so it spurs action. 2, it's rooted in community knowledge and agency. We don't take the conventional academic top-down model. It's a horizontal model of co-production. 3rd, the work is cross-disciplinary and cross-sector, all the sectors I mentioned before. The work emphasizes co-benefits, job creation, local economic development, which help to create support in the host community. And 5th, the work is about integration. It's not about charity. It's not about the needs of the body. It's about integrating the migrant and her family into the life, the spiritual, economic, and social life of the community. So it's an issue of the heart as much as it is an issue of the law or policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Foreman. We turn now to our colleague, Mr. Pio. Let's go back to the matter of land use planning in African cities to assist in building resilience for climate-related migration.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. People seems to maybe have taken. Yeah, so thank you, and also I want to appreciate the organizers for having this powerful panel and also discussing and sharing what's happening in other continents and in other countries. Looking at from your conceptualization of this discussion, from how you feel family as a unit of entry, but also looking at the issue of children, looking at the issue of Fulani in a peri-urban area, and the migration between those particular areas, between Mexico and US. This is something which you need to understand, that all this require planning, because all these people require space. Okay? Children require space. It has education facilities, and which children safe spaces, so we're able to address these challenges. Yeah. And that's why land use planning becomes important. Important in which ways? Looking at the mobility, climate mobility. 1, you need to factor how you integrate climate resilience in any planning. And here Governor Tichilo will tell you, with technology, GIS, remote sensing, it becomes a very powerful tool. In the morning, I think I enjoyed a session by AI, machine learning. Very important in terms of how you integrate and ensure that you are able to address the needs of different people in urban areas, especially in African cities. And African cities, we know that Africa is the most urbanizing continent. Currently, we have 36% of African urban areas. It's projected by the year 2050 will be over 50. By the year 2060, will be around 60. So what does this mean? That as we plan our cities, we need to be alive of these challenges in terms of how climate is going to affect how the outlook of African cities. There's a good attempt in this country when initially refugees were seen as transient community, that within a few years' time, they'll go back to their country. But we've experienced in Kakuma, in Turkana, and in Dadaab, actually refugees have been here for 30 years. So how do we address this? We need to look at mechanisms of having planning where you integrate the host and refugee community so they're able to address their needs as human beings. Because at times we don't find that the way we do planning, we don't address their issues. So that's why I'm saying cities, land use planning in African cities will be very important in terms of addressing climate challenges, which are associated with climate mobility. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was exemplary. Pithy, clear, on point. An example of how to give a reflection. So thank you. Thank you so much. So we have the problem that we always have. Time eats its children. So, boss, how much time do we have? We're done with the time. Minus, or people were late, Joaquin.
Yeah, we started a little late after lunch. So we'll give
Quite
a
late.
bit of time for question
you.
and answer. So
Thank
we'll give it until the half hour.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Then having a second round of questions, because we're fighting something very profound here. You know, the monks, the medieval monks, divided the day into 6 parts. Do you know what the word siesta? Who knows the word siesta? Okay, siesta. That comes from that's the 6th part of the day. Now is siesta time. We go to sleep. So in order to avoid this biological impulse for siesta, we'll open it up for questions now from the audience. We have an extraordinarily rich set of interventions for a defining feature of humanity, the migration of peoples in the context of climate change. So I open it up to our brothers and sisters for your questions, your concerns. And let's follow the model of our colleague here. Questions, not lectures.
Thank you for very. I have a question to Professor Foreman. The project that you are doing sounds absolutely amazing. How would it be scalable to, for example, the context we have here in Kenya? Thank you.
That's the obvious question that is a terrifying question to think about the project at scale. But say is that we are trying to rethink what universities can do and the role that academics can play in facilitating the kind of cross-sector coalitions that can produce a project like this one. So what's happening, we're seeing the model repeated along the US-Mexico border. So we're seeing sister cities along the border region producing similar kinds of projects. But I would need to have a long conversation with people here to understand the applicability and scalability of a project like this in a very different context. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a question here, then back there, then here, and then you.
Yeah, thank you. First, how do you differentiate between climate change migration and conflict and politics, or is there a mix of it? And you talked about models. And do you expect in the future different scenarios, south-north migration or south-south migration? What is the trend? What do you expect? Or north-north-south in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years?
Carola?
First part of the question, and when you talk to people about their migration, often there are mixed motives in why they move. So sometimes there's a clear impetuous, when there's a climate shock, for example, then and groups of people leave all at the same time, it's clearly a hurricane that has occurred, for example. But in many cases, for example, people coming from Central America, there's some sort of climate shock, and then, but that doesn't make them leave right away, but then work disappears, and then violence starts to occur. And so people leave for a mixed, and then there are family members who went ahead. So when you really ask them, there's several reasons behind their motivations. So I just wanted to address that first part. But the North-South question, yeah.
Let me also add that sometimes there's an erroneous impression that a lot of the migrations that is going to take place from Africa, international migration will move towards the north. But in actual fact, when you look at the data, you see in our own countries, if you talk about internal migration and even migrations in West Africa, migrations across borders are probably going to still dominate. And international migration will be just a small portion of the kinds of migration we'll be experiencing. Thank you.
It's very important. The South-South migration is a domain that we've developed in other contexts. I can comment on that. The statistical probability that a refugee, let's just take a random country in Africa, will make it to Germany is less than 1 in 100. Meaning, two things are true. We live in the age of mass migrations. We also live in the age of mass zones of confinement. It was Hannah Arendt, a refugee from another terrible time, who announced to the world, when you lose the right to have rights, you have the beginning of barbarism. And this is what's going on increasingly around the world. Zones of confinement. These are bilateral agreements between governments. We have a lot of examples here, the Middle East, South America to Central America to North America. So this is, the true things are true. We live in the age of mass migration. We also live in the age of mass confinement, where folk cannot access the right to have rights. This is a catastrophic development and a emptying of the fundamental principles of the Geneva Conventions. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hear me, yeah? Again, thank you for the panel. Border area, a great example of where climate change and human security damage actually meet. And I've worked, and I'm still working as CAN and as an individual as well as a researcher on the border communities of northeastern Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia, to the Mandera Triangle. And what you said really resonates with me because we see the similar things. I think a lot of border communities face similar issues. But what's makes more complex in the Mandera or northeastern part of Kenya is the security aspect of this. We have issue of Al-Shabaab that also community are caught between the two, especially Somalia and Kenya side, and there's an issue of governance. And my question is, I mean, we work with the communities, and the communities have a lot of ways of adapting and supporting each other of what they see in terms of climate change and climate impact. It has directly in the community, but issue of security and also peace building. But where do the states within the border actually fit into? How can they come in here and maybe collectively respond to it, the situations in the border area?
Thank you. My question will be with Professor Kojo. Thank you for an important piece of work on an old phenomenon in West Africa. I was wondering, however, listening to the classification, the taxonomy sedentary Fulanis, nomad Fulanis, urban Fulanis. I was wondering, here we have a case where occupation and ethnicity overlap to some extent, but not all Fulanis are nomad and not all nomads are Fulanis. In our language, doing this research, are we risking creating some stigmatization by having this kind of language? And we know that one of the biggest impediments against migration is stigmatization, right? Like in the US, everybody from the South is selling drugs, right? So I'm not saying that this is the same thing here, but perhaps is there any way that we can use the traditional taxonomy of nomadism, transhumance, because it really doesn't matter who they are at the end of the day, right? But if we get the kind of language, I'm just wondering, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it might, then it may make things really different, because you'll have a lot of Fulanis in Accra who are not herders, have nothing to do with them, or you could have them in Dakar as well. So thank you.
My question is on to Dr. Obio, and the thing is that you mentioned about urbanization, right? And one of the things that we are finding is that the refugees are like part of the urbanization. If you talk of Kakuma Karobei, it's recognized now as an urban center and it's being planned as an urban center. And the thing is shifting the paradigm shift from looking at refugees as a problem to being part of the solution. One of the things that I haven't had discussed is the issue of food security. You mentioned about planning, and when you look at the food security issue, we are finding that the refugees get relief aid, but they have no energy to cook. So they are remaining food insecure, even if they have bags of beans in their house. So how is that planning being integrated and linking food security and cooking energy? And that's one of the things we are working on. Thanks.
So Sabira, online you can unmute and then ask your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter. I'm a youth advisor to the Africa Scout Committee, and my question will go to Carola. How can governments and local communities work together to build long-term resilience for populations facing displacement due to climate change, while ensuring that these climate migrants have access to rights, resources, and dignified livelihoods in their new communities? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I think you are right. If you look at most of the publications, and in fact, the caption of what I sent to the chair, I put the Fulanis in parentheses. You would normally refer to these as nomadic headers. Okay, so the issue is about nomadic headers, but the Fulani, in this case, is not so much of the ethnic Fulani. Because if you talk about the ethnic Fulani, it's the terminology has become more synonymous to the practice, more or less. Yeah. So we are talking about nomadic headers. And if you recall, I also talked about the ownership of the cattle. The ownership of the cattle are not ethnic Fulanis at all. It's a combination of all sorts of people. We are hearing, as I said, very powerful people, dotted all around West Africa, to the extent that very famous politicians and all that, they own these cattle. that is these nomadic herders are using. So you are right. We are talking about nomadic herders here. Thank you.
I'm going to give a very brief answer to a complicated question from the gentleman who just asked the latest question. I think the first step is you have to recognize the children are very much at the center of they're a large percentage of who's being affected, and they're the most vulnerable. So starting by recognizing and then planning for the realities of their lives. They're not going to disappear in 3 years. It's not a short-term issue. They're likely to spend their entire childhood in displacement and are likely to become part of the societies that they've moved into, and therefore they need to receive an education. So they need to be integrated into the education system, because if they're not educated, they will not be able to join society in a constructive way. And then, you know, safe spaces, et cetera, housing, et cetera. So recognizing, planning, and funding for them would be the short answer to a complicated question.
Just a quick comment on securitization and security issues at the border. I mean, in this culture of containment, the most vulnerable people on the planet are facing the most securitized on the planet. Borders are getting thicker, higher, more dangerous, more violent, formally and informally. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mary, on the issue of food security. Yeah, you are right that now the Kenyan government has recognized Kakuma as part of municipality. Actually, it's given municipality status, yeah? And what's the benefit of that? First, that means that now they can be recognized and budgeted for just the way you budget for the local community. Because those challenges, for example, there's a study which was done by UN Habitat in 2015 before integration of Kalobeye community between the Kakuma and Kalobeye. And one of the challenges was the issue of security, especially affecting women when they are going to look for firewood. Yeah, they become a target to local community. So once they are part of CIDP, County Integrated Development Plan and County Spatial Plan, then they will be able now to be planned intentionally within the budgetary framing document of the government of Kenya. So that's the way they can be included. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the responses. The final question is the biblical question. Be kind to the stranger, for you too were strangers in the land of Egypt. Let me give you a very basic example. Between the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the first decade of the 20th century, 50 million European souls left the old continent. 50 million. Today, Europe, as if by centennial design, is recuperated and recuperating the souls it lost. So let's have history. Let's have memory. Let's have what our call ethic of care, drive. Sorry, thank you, Professor. Are thinking about migration. Let's lower the temperature. Everywhere there is hysteria over immigration, even in countries that are demographically being challenged by the need of labor. So be kind to the stranger. We end a very complicated human problem with our panel. Very complicated and very simple. It was a refugee at the end of his life, a very wise, a very brilliant person who in exile was asked for a response to a very basic question. The question from the journalist, this is the last interview he gave. The question from the journalist to Sigmund Freud was, Professor Freud, you spend your whole life studying the human condition. What have you learned? What is the formula for a happy life? Expecting a long discourse. Freud, in 3 German words, answer. An answer that I think applies to migration. Love and work. If you can love and work, you should be a happy person. Why do people migrate? I'm a Freudian. Love and work. Thank you very much. You saved me with the water. Like the soccer players, you know, we're in the field. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Another round of applause for our wonderful panelists. And as they take the picture, I think they're done now, but as they depart the stage, I want to do a small check with each table. Yeah. I want you to turn to your neighbor and ask them what emoji describes their current feeling about the summit. Please. What emoji describes your current feeling about the summit? Okay. I'll be taking a few responses from the audience.
The mind blown one.
The one here. Matt?
Oh, I like his.
Eye-opening. Eye-opened emoji, shock, or yeah, just eyes open. Eyes open.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can get the camera on him.
This guy.
So which one is it? The?
I don't know which part.
Yes, the happy one. There are several, but very content. I'll take a few more. Here at this table, Governor. A happy face, a smiley. Thank you. Two more. Two more from the back. From the back. Here.
Show you.
Oh, she's showing me. Okay. Okay. Oh, a hug over here. All right, so because of time, I think we can now proceed to the next session. And we want to move now into an open discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we have sampled wisdom on resilience and extreme weather. We have savored knowledge on bioeconomy and land use. We have masticated information on nature-based solutions, and we have ingested assessments on climate-related migration. And therefore, I invite you to give another round of applause to each and every one of our panelists thus far. Because now is the time to absorb and digest. And to help us in this process, I invite to the stage Joaquin Van Braun, President of the Pontifical Academies of Sciences, as he goes to the stage. And Marcelo Suarez, who was with us on stage momentarily, to guide us through the next session. Welcome.
Let me kick it off. We don't have much time, but we should take time to hear voices that haven't spoken so far. We should take ample amount of time, Marcelo, to thank and to have the closing remarks. We don't want to eat into that. And I know some of you need to catch planes and so on and travel. So we will end on time. That's a commitment. We are supposed to end at, Matt, when? 4. That gives us an hour. I hope some of you also will have time to hang around and talk to people which you haven't been able to talk to. That will be a beneficiary for the way forward. You have all been patient listeners, so I suggest we have a bit of free-flowing discussions. I mean, I'm still captivated by the last session, but think also about the first session. Presentation by Governor Otichelu, and second, third, fourth, fifth session. This is to be the cross-cutting discussion. Before we enter into that, let me make a few remarks with a positive spirit of some takeaways. I sense some of you are frustrated, saying, well, we have been talking so often. We are repeating ourselves. Well, what are conferences about? They're about talking. Action has to come on the way home and where we are. Sheikh, I'm looking to you. And that you continue to come to conferences and talk and inspire us is important, most important. Here are my few remarks that may trigger some further questions. I think we have tremendous progress in the science systems of Africa related to climate and climate resilience. We have tremendous progress in the data that inform us about resilience. Farmers know. We know that from surveys. If you ask men and women farmers, do you know about what's happening with climate? You get very constructive answers. Whether you do that survey in Zimbabwe or Ethiopia or in West Africa, farmers know and adapt. But that adaptation is running into difficulties. Secondly, we have tremendous progress in local government and decentralized action. I refer to the Commissioner's presentation. We have significant progress on the front of understanding the health, nutrition, food, and mental consequences of climate shocks. Unless we know, we cannot act. So we know a lot more on that. And the public health system is in a better position to respond. In the last 10 years, Africa has built stronger and more adaptable social safety nets. We had a brief discussion in, I believe, the third session on that. That is new. They didn't exist before COVID. They did not exist before. And they come in now very handy to respond to climate shocks and climate issues. Yesterday, the youth initiatives, the discussions which we had at the tables, picked one topic as their number one. Jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. One table after the other. Because, number one, it's an issue of concern, and number two, we know what needs to be done more in order to create jobs, green jobs, productive jobs, jobs based on solid education and on improved financial systems. And we had solid and good discussions about nature-based solutions. I, however, feel there is, from our own research, a gap. We don't relate nature-based solutions enough to jobs and employment. I can tell you the research on nature-based solutions, agroecology, etc., has a big gap. It focuses on the land and not on the people. You practically find not more than a handful of studies in all of Africa that relate nature-based solutions and bioeconomy and agroecology to labor productivity. We have to fill that gap. That's also a role of conferences, to identify research gaps. I feel, and this is not a concluding remark, Africa is a lot more ready than only a decade ago to strategize for climate resilience, to implement and to act. I used to have be part of a school in West Africa, in 11 West African countries, for climate economics and climate resilience, which produced more than 40 doctoral students. The quality of debate, I mean, based in Senegal and in Ivory Coast, the Sahel, and so on, the quality of debate, the knowledge and strength of debate in the countries where all these students came from has improved vastly within a decade. It has to continue. So we have, I think, focused a lot on nature capital, and that's important. Africa has a lot of value in its nature capital, but that nature capital will only be tapped with strong human capital. And that's, I think, a message which you may like to also find provocative. I now sit down next to Marcelo, and Marcelo make a few remarks, and then folks jump up and don't ask questions anymore. Speak your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Wise words and your partnership. First, I am so grateful to all of you. When you get to my age, you see the white hair, learning is more important. And I'm of an age now when often it's not true. And what is true is not true. So this is a point of entry to acknowledging, of knowing that are different terminologies for them. We talk about indigenous knowledge, about the voices of youth. So I am grateful because I learned so much. I am grateful to my friend, my brother, who inspired us and was critical in helping us organize this extraordinary summit. The great Governor Wilbur Oticillo. I'm also happy because I think we obey the words of Holy Father Pope Leo. Move. Take from words to action. But in a mindful, in a smart, in a resilient, in a sustainable, in a humane. We know, Africa already has extraordinary lessons, pockets of resilience. We've learned in the last 2 days about extraordinary examples. I think we need to continue with urgency, and we will, through the summit processes, to accelerate the sharing of knowledge, of research, technical knowledge, nature-based solutions. As Professor mitigation is global. Adaptation is local. And climate change is fundamentally local when it comes to our mandate to protect the most vulnerable populations. Once the regional summits that will take us to Vienna next, Brasilia, India, Japan, China, Senegal, Australia. We will reconvene in the Vatican City to take our collective wisdom, the knowledge, the science, to develop a global blueprint for resilience that we hope will be adopted worldwide. Climate resilience today is a shared project of humanity. I end with a deep sense of gratitude. Muchas, muchas gracias. Thank you all.
Colleagues, you switch me on again? It's on. We had an exciting session guided by the youth participants yesterday. It should have gone on and on. I would like at this stage ask youth representative to come up and maybe introduce what they conclude. I know some of them have worked in the evening on a statement, but can I call on you now? Callisto, would you do so? Not ready? Please come. If you would bring company, bring company. Can all walk up.
All the changes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are we all doing fine? All right. So, I'm happy to present the youth perspective from the discussions we had yesterday, and also just to appreciate every single person for your contributions. We saw a lot of intergenerational dialogue and contributions from everyone to help us come up with this statement. So, we, the youth of Africa, gathered at the Resilient Africa Summit convened here in Nairobi, and really appreciate the organizers of the summit for the opportunity to be in this space and all the stakeholders present today. We affirm our commitment to be active agents of change in shaping the policies, systems, and solutions that determine the sustainability, prosperity, health, and health of our continent now and in the future. We commend the active engagement of Africa's youth throughout the conference, most especially through the mass dialogue yesterday, but also through the inclusion in different panels that young people have been part of throughout the sessions. We reiterate Africa's position as the youngest continent and the urgent need to harness these statistics, not just as victims of climate crisis, but as vital actors to the context-specific solutions for Africa at local and regional levels. We request inclusion and co-leadership in line with the principles of intergenerational equity in shaping and implementing multi-resilient solutions at all levels. And with this, as our opening statement, I invite my colleague to take us through the 6 key points that we addressed yesterday and the outcomes from each of the 6 areas. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. On education and climate change, we emphasize that the challenges which create the barriers to climate action still include inaccessible education and clear jargons, non-contextual solutions, and knowledge, and also the disconnect between local and indigenous knowledge and scientific research, including the exclusion of grassroots voices in co-creation of knowledge. We therefore urge government institutions and agencies to co-create inclusive, community-driven communication strategies that use relevant and context-specific strategies and language. We also invite non-state actors, including religious leaders and faith-based organizations, to strengthen climate literacy efforts through school and community-based climate drives, faith-based initiatives, and community learning spaces. We urge researchers and the academic community to also incorporate informal education grounded in lived experiences, traditional knowledge, and local solutions with the scientific process of research and knowledge management. We further urge government to integrate climate education across formal curricula, teacher training, and embedded within national, district or county policies and strategies. We also further request parties to leverage innovative digital and technological tools to facilitate interactive, localized, and inclusive learning. We commend the efforts to embed climate action into education, from basic education to tertiary and vocational education and training across board. On jobs and climate change, we acknowledge the need for a future where climate action drives innovation, entrepreneurship, and meaningful employment for Africa's youth. So we request for government and non-governmental actors to advance policy reforms that make green jobs and low carbon economies. We also request increased government investment to create, support, and upskill youth-led sustainable enterprises backed by affirmative and robust finance flows and mechanisms. We also urge all youth to support a paradigm shift from job seeking to job creation, whilst mainstreaming climate action within businesses through youth-led entrepreneurship and innovation. We request that all parties present support the development of climate-smart and resilient infrastructure and support systems to create the pathways for decent work. We also urge parties to commit large-scale investments into renewable energy and circular economy solutions, because this is very important to us. On health and adaptation, we acknowledge that a healthy Africa is a resilient Africa, and climate resilience must prioritize the physical and mental health of all persons and communities, including young people. We therefore urge all parties to amplify reduction efforts for emissions and strategies that directly impact our air quality and prevent climate-related illnesses, especially for vulnerable groups. We further urge all parties to increase investment again in diversified and sustainable food systems to improve overall nutrition for individuals, communities, and then all persons. On food systems and transformation again, from food systems and transformation, we recognize that food systems are at the center of both the climate crisis and the solution. And in Africa, 70% of our livelihoods are linked to agriculture directly. Therefore, we urge parties to fix food systems in order to ensure our health, safe health, livelihoods, and ecosystems for our future. On must solutions, we urge the promotion of regenerative. Again, on food systems, we urge the promotive of regenerative agriculture and soil health to reduce food loss and invest in low emission technology and renewable energy for food production by all persons or parties. We also request an urgent diversification of crops and foods to promote and the promotion of indigenous climate resilient seeds, to improve water management while strengthening community seed banks and services. We further urge parties to advance societal transformation, address structural and cultural challenges in land use, ownership, and approach agriculture as a mindset shift towards a circular food economy system. We also further urge all stakeholders. We also urge all stakeholders to prioritize food systems in climate plans and budgeting processes at both the national and then subnational level, and also request that young agripreneurs and digital innovators are empowered through capacitation. On science and knowledge, we recognize the need for climate science and policy to be accessible, relevant, and informed by African realities. We therefore urge researchers, academia, and non-state actors to translate scientific research and technical knowledge into contextual formats and creative knowledge materials such as podcasts, comic strips, illustrations, visual storytelling for knowledge sharing and also knowledge enhancement for young people. We further encourage the youth, research, and academia to protect, value, and integrate traditional knowledge systems into formal science agenda. We urge stakeholders to facilitate intergenerational knowledge transfer through mentorship, community gatherings, and archivals. On movement building, we acknowledge the relevance of growing youth movements and the need for a sustainable, grassroots-focused, and intergenerational connectivity to build a collective power that leads change across. We therefore urge the government and all actors to build inclusive, structured movements that prioritize intergenerational equity and solidarity, ensuring active participation, leadership, and the recognition of the role of young people, elders, and marginalized groupings across board in climate action. We also call on educational institutions and academia and research, including policy actors, to enhance the foundational knowledge in climate science and policy, while we strengthen our local capacities as well. We further encourage the creation and institutionalization of platforms that engage children and youth from an early age to cultivate climate leadership, ensure long-term continuity, and initiatives. We also further urge policymakers, developmental institutions, and knowledge networks to make climate knowledge products, tools, and financial resources widely accessible, particularly to young people, to bridge inequality gaps and ensure that no one is left behind in a just transition for a sustainable Africa. In conclusion, we, the young people of Africa, reaffirm our commitment to be active actors in climate change conversations because it defines our future. And today we spotlight how young Africans and change makers like us are designing and leading the solutions that matter to ensure that no one is left behind. We commit that we would act boldly, think creatively, organize collectively, and with this call to all our institutions and the partners in this room, including those outside of this room, we hope that you stand with us and not speak just for us, but encourage us to speak up for ourselves as well as we build a resilient, just, and sustainable Africa, because there's nothing about us without us, and our time is now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It has happened again. 9 years ago, we had a conference in the Pontifical Academy of Science in the Vatican under the topic Education for Sustainability. We had invited 25 or so youth from all over the world. They came, they were 12 to 16-year-olds, so not as mature as you are. They came with teachers and parents. We had our workshop. We had worked hard on our statement, which we have shared with you yesterday. And the youth delegates had worked day and night on their statement, and it was a lot stronger and better than ours. It happened again. Thank you. We applaud you. Let's make sure that the two statements, the statement of the organizers, which we have shared with all participants, and you are encouraged to share it in your communities and to comment on it, share it in social media. Be critical with it if you like to, but share it as an outcome. And please, I ask you the same. We will do our best to share it, your statement, once you have sent it to us, to put it on our website of the Pontifical Academy of Science and other outlets. In this closing session, we ask a few people to make comments. Mohammed Hassan, Professor Mohammed Hassan, has been an important contributor to shape the agenda of this conference. Mohammed Hassan was a former president of the World Academy, president of the Academy of Science of Sudan, and is in various organizations, including a member of the Council of the Pontifical Academy of Science. Mohammed, we would like to hear your remarks. Thereafter, we will ask Eliane to make a few remarks, and Archbishop Philip Agnolo. Ilyana, will you have time to come later on stage right after Mohammed? Yeah, thank you. Mohammed, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Joachim. I have 4 key issues which I would like to highlight as my remarks, as a summary of my remarks. The first one is an important issue, I think, for Africa, and it was mentioned yesterday by Governor Botticello. It relates to policies and planning. I think we have to make sure that we have the right policies and the right planning before we move forward. So, as he mentioned, the African Union has established a comprehensive climate change adaptation plan, guided by Agenda 2063, and aimed at building resilience across the continent. And following the African Union, this regional resilience or adaptation plan across the continent, a number of countries have started to develop their own national adaptation plans. And to my knowledge, there are currently about 20 countries that have developed national adaptation plans. So there are many others that should come, and some of them have actually started to develop that. In this plan, the African Union, I think, has been very clear, and this is so important in my view. In their adaptation plan, they are encouraging the local communities and the governors, as well as the mayors, to take the lead in implementation. And that was explicit. And that was actually taken up by some countries in their national development plans, including, of course, Kenya. And furthermore, and that is important also, they have decided that every country, after developing its national adaptation plan, should make sure that this plan is integrated into the national development plan. Because if you want to get funding from the government, you have to make sure that you are in the national development plan. And again, a number of countries have done that based on this recommendation, including Kenya. So, as an excellent example of policies at the national level and also at the local level that have worked very hard to secure implementation, is the excellent example given to us yesterday by Governor Botticello. And this is what they call here County Climate Change Fund, not country, county. And this, I think, in my view, is very critical. And it should be emulated, as I mentioned yesterday, by the countries, by the other countries in Africa. And the funds support adaptation projects implemented at the local and community level. So that's my first observation. My second observation relates to adaptation and co-benefits. And I think this is very important in Africa. Whatever Africa does in adaptation, it has immediate impact on the quality of life in the country. So adaptation and resilience actions plans provide numerous co-benefits that extend far beyond environmental improvements. And one key example is the one that we mentioned there several times, is the provision of renewable energy. You see, if this is secured through solar power, then the population that's lacking electricity, and as we said several times, almost half of the population in Africa have no electricity. So just imagine doing that. It's not only for adaptation, it will be for everything else, for cooking, for water pumps that operate to get water, for drinking, for irrigation. Lots of benefits result from that. So again, this is an important issue, the second one. The third one, and we talked about this a number of times, is capacity building and education. And enhancing capacities of communities and institutions in climate change adaptation at all levels is really very crucial and critical. This can be achieved through education, training, public awareness campaigns, and the exchange of knowledge and best practices, including the application of climate resilience technologies and traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge was mentioned also several times. Now, mitigation, adaptation, and social transformation that we talked about here a lot. In my view, education must be included or integrated into school curricula, ensuring that all children in Africa develop a deep understanding of adaptation issues and sustainable practices from a young age. This education should promote critical thinking about environmental challenges and prepare students for careers in sustainable and green technologies. And finally, the fourth is on collaboration. And again, we talked a lot about that. But in recent years, meetings of African mayors and governors have played a vital role in understanding and addressing climate change adaptation and forums for local leaders to discuss joint actions, share experiences, and issue statements that call for urgent action on climate adaptation and resilience, especially at the local and community levels. We strongly recommend the involvement of academies of science under the umbrella of NASAC, as well as the young academies. And to my knowledge, there are now about 20, maybe over 20, Jackie, young academies. And we really strongly recommend that they should be involved in all these meetings or summits of African mayors and governors. African mayors and governments can collaboratively address funding challenges for climate change resilience by forming strategic partnerships and networks that pool resources and knowledge. By uniting their voices, they can advocate for increased financial support from national governments, international organizations, and private investors committed to sustainable development. And a notable example, I think we mentioned that yesterday also, of such collective action occurred during a meeting in Nairobi in February 2025, where mayors and governors signed an open letter addressed to the ministers of finance. And in this letter, they urged the unlocking of necessary financing to build resilience against the escalating climate emergency. Moreover, joint initiatives such as regional projects focused on renewable energy, green infrastructure, and community-based adaptation strategies can attract funding from climate finance mechanisms like the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and the Global Environment Facility. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to extend my our heartfelt thanks to the Chief Executive Officer of C4 ICRAF and her team for organizing this extremely profitable event. And we appreciate your hard work and dedication in making this event a great success. Thank you very much.
Well, youth colleagues, this was intergenerational dialogue, wasn't it? Thank you very much, Mohammed, for your wisdom and for your amplification of points which we had briefly in our strategic statement, such as education. I think we all can work hard to bring climate curricula into schools and not only in the university programs. I was about to ask Eliane, okay, Eliane, we would like to ask you for your pearls of wisdom now. Before I do so, let me echo Mohammed's warm thank you. This conference is with you in deep gratitude, you and your whole team, everyone here, those who cooked for us, those who shared sessions, those who facilitate the ins and outs of our mobility here in town. It was fabulous. Thank you so much. Please address us. And then we call on His Excellency thereafter. Please.
Good afternoon. For all of you online, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's a pleasure and an honor to have hosted all of you for the last 2 days. And it's something here at C4 ICRAF we did not take lightly. And often some people say that the journey from the mind to the heart is the longest journey that we take. But during these last 2 days, that journey was taken with all of you, taken at the speed of trust because of how you brought all of yourselves to this event. And I thank you deeply for that. It's really been meaningful for us to have you, and I know my staff, we felt great honor to have you with us here. I want to give deep thanks as well to the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences for choosing C4 ICRAF to host this unique conference here, and for all the partners. Over the past 2 days, we explored practices of resilience already underway in African cities and rural communities, innovative approaches to climate finance, and the ways our institutions, from local governments to regional alliances, can scale these solutions equitably. We confronted the realities of climate-related migration. We were taken through a meditation to understand what does it feel like to be a young person struggling with climate-related disasters. We really were able to imagine systems of governance and care that are more anticipatory, more just, and more inclusive. And we heard from passionate youth who are making a difference in their communities, the brave next generation of resilience. It is clear we have moved beyond mitigation alone and have embraced a broader, more inclusive framework of mitigation, adaptation, and social transformation. It's time for this approach to spread further across ministries, across markets, research and development institutions, academic institutions from kindergarten to universities, and faith communities. And at the heart of this transformation is care, not just for ecosystems, but for each other. As Cardinal Turkson said, the earth is a garden meant to be tended with care. We must move from stewards of creation to carers of creation. What we received with beauty and life, we must not pass on as wilderness. We are called to go beyond stewardship and build a culture of care that reconnects people to land. Resilience is not merely about withstanding the next shock. It is about cultivating the conditions where people and nature can thrive together. To realize this, we must unlock new forms of collaboration with faith-based organizations, local indigenous communities, and with the private sector, from micro-entrepreneurs that are smallholder farmers to the bigger agribusinesses. Climate resilience must be seen not only as a moral imperative, but as a long-term investment in shared prosperity and sustainability. At C4 ICRAF, we will continue to use our science and action on the ground to guide policy, serve communities, and improve lives. And we are committed to being part of what follows from this summit, which itself is part of a growing global movement, championed by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, to shape a universal protocol for climate resilience.
This is a vision we will carry forward through COP30, COP31, and ultimately to the final Vatican Summit in 2026. And it begins here on African soil with African leadership, African knowledge, and African action. Let us move forward together in solidarity, compassion, and hope. Thank you, Asante Sam.
Thank you so much. Archbishop Philip Agnolo, we would like to ask you to step to the podium and give us your inputs into this conference. We are very grateful that you joined us today. You are on a very busy schedule. You told me you spent some time in Germany. You're happy to, or lucky not to be there today, because in Saarbrücken, where you were, they have 40 degrees Celsius today. So not comfortable time. It's a very unusual situation. Colleagues, leadership in the clergy has the international experience, and you are an example of that. You are an African bishop, you have been around the world, and that's why your wisdom about adaptation and resilience is important to us. Please take the floor.
So, Your Excellency, the Governor here present with us, our esteemed scientists and researchers, our youth leaders, and then distinguished guests here, our ladies and our gentlemen, good afternoon. Now that our lady who was here mentioned the long journey from the head, from the mind to the heart, I want to ask you, how are your hearts? You are happy. That is the good news. It is with a great heart for me also to express my gratitude and deep reflection on this that you have been addressing, the conclusion of a historic African Summit on Climate Resilience held under the auspiciousness of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. I thank each one of you who traveled from near and far to participate in these rich and necessary conversations born from the urgent call to protect our common home, OICO. This gathering is not only timely, but very providential. It follows the global framework set forth by the Vatican, which is in recent years has led with courage and conviction in articulating a moral and scientific response to the climatic situation in the world. His Holiness Pope Francis, whose spiritual leadership remains deeply within us, has this ever to tell us unequivocally. The environmental crisis we face is inseparably linked to social, economic, and ethical crises that we go through. In his landmark encyclical letter, Laudato Si, Pope Francis writes, "There is an urgent need for us to move forward in a bold cultural revolution. The earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is the reality that many of our African countries and communities confront daily. Nairobi is not exceptional. Whether in the form of pollution of air, whether in the form of depleted water resources, whether in collapsing agricultural yields, rising hard heat waves, or displacement of that is caused due to erratic climate patterns, all are challenges that we face. For too many, climate change is not a theoretical construct debate in academic halls. It is a reality that we all face and suffer from. This summit in Nairobi builds upon the global call to action initiated at the Vatican and personally signed by the Holy Father, Pope Francis. As you are aware, the Holy Father strongly emphasized the bottom-up approach to climate resilience, rooted in local leadership and scientific excellency. This, and with his passing, the pontiff and his academic pontifical institutions has taken a milestone in this meeting that we have today. We in Africa are proud to be part of the pioneering group that we are sharing these informations with one another today. Our foundational principle here has been the MUST. That's the strategy that we call mitigation, adaptation, and social transformation. And we have explored this tripartite lens with depth, with clarity, and with creativity. The experience we have had also from the young people expressing their way forward. It is now widely recognized that while mitigating remains necessary, it is no longer sufficient. We must also adapt to the unfolding climate conditions that have already surpassed key ecological thresholds. And beyond adaptation, we are called to transformation of systems and governance, and yes, our hearts. Scientific data presented during our summit has been sobering. Global temperatures are projected to rise beyond the 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold by the year 2030. For the African continent, this means disproportionate impacts on ecosystems, human health, food security, and economic development. Such is happening also in Saarbrücken. We have heard how East Africa is experiencing erratic rainfall, prolonged droughts, and the desertifications of unprecedented rates. Meanwhile, West and Central Africa are increasingly vulnerable to floodings and biodiversity collapse. In the face of such data, our response must be deeply interdisciplinary. We must harness the best of climate science, indigenous knowledge, spiritual wisdom, and practical policies. We must deepen collaboration among our global leaders, researchers, and faith leaders. As we have seen here, solutions must be contextual and grounded in local ecological realities and community engagement. This is where the Church can and must play a prophetic role. The Catholic Church in Africa, through its vast network of dioceses, schools, hospitals, and social institutions, is uniquely positioned to foster resilience at a high scale. But more than infrastructure, we offer moral framework. We affirm that the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are one, as written again in the letter of the Holy Father, Laudato Si, and reminded as such. The climate is common good, belonging to all and meant for all. What does this mean for Africa? It means that climate justice must be at the heart of all planning and policies. Africa has contributed the least to historical greenhouse gas emissions, yet it suffers some of the greatest consequences. Our summit has underscored the need for equitable finance, climate funding that is accessible, transparent, and directed towards locally led adaptations and innovations. Without access to funding, especially for rural communities, resilience remains a distant dream. Pope Francis was equally clear in his more recent exhortation, Laudato Deum, as he says, it is no longer possible to doubt the human anthropic origin of climate change. The impact of climate change will increasingly prejudice the lives and families of many people worldwide. So he says, in this truth lies our shared responsibility. Climate change is not an isolated environmental issue. It is an existential, spiritual, geographical challenge that calls for moral clarity and united global action. We are interconnected, not only through markets and media, but through the air we breathe, the rivers we drink from, and the planetary systems that sustain us. Our summit has borne witness to the strength of regional leadership. We have had inspiring examples of climate-smart agriculture, nature-based solutions, regenerative land management, and youth-led advocacy. These are not just projects. They are seeds of hope, signs that a different future is not only possible, but already emerging. Let me offer you three parting reflections as we close. Number one, let us deepen the integration of science and spirituality. The climate crisis is not only about carbon levels and temperature curves. It is about values. It's about worldviews and the sacredness of creation. Our African cosmologies have long taught us the interconnectedness of life. Let us bring these traditions into conversation with contemporary sciences for holistic solutions. Number two, let us invest in education and youth leadership. The youth who spoke in this summit reminded us that they are not just the future leaders, they are indeed current stakeholders. Let us accompany them with tools and platforms and resources to shape their own climate destiny. Number three, let us uphold the dignity of every human person. As the church teaches, integral ecology is about more than preserving ecosystems. It is about creating a society where human flourishing and planetary health coexist. My dear brothers and my dear sisters, Nairobi is a city of resilience. It is also a city of dreams. From this summit, let a new dream emerge, not one of distant idealism, but of resolute action. Let every participant here commit to being a catalyst in your own region, your own city, your own institution, and your own country. As the prophet Isaiah proclaimed, enlarge the place of your tent. Lengthen your cords, strengthen your stakes. Let us also too enlarge the tents of climate action. Let us lengthen our reach across continents and strengthen our foundations in science, in ethics, and in faith. I wish to thank the Pontifical Academies, the World Agroforestry Center for graciously hosting us as our international and regional partners, and every delegate for whom we value the contributions they have brought to this summit. May God grant us the wisdom to care for creation and the courage to act with justice. And may the legacy of this gathering be felt not only in documents, but in declarations and also in actions. Let us transform our societies by thinking rightly, by speaking rightly, and by acting with our hands rightly. So head, heart, and hands, you put them together. May God bless you most abundantly.
See of the conversation and the exchanges, an extremely valuable contribution. You started us with a call to the heart. You asked us, how is your heart? And this is so profound. The heart knows of reasons for which reason has no reason, said that extraordinary Catholic thinker, mathematician, Pascal. The heart knows of reason for which there is no reason. Thank you also for reminding us that this movement and this crisis evades the Cartesian binary. It is, as Your Excellency articulated, a single crisis that we're facing. We're not facing a crisis of the environment, a crisis of inequality, a crisis. We're facing a singular crisis. Thank you for reminding us of that. It was indeed an African, a Pilar, who from Paris reminded us there is no hope. You have to build it. Albert Camus. So we move forward joining faith and reason, faith and science as the true north guiding the work now and moving forward as we face the single most significant planetary crisis in the history of humanity. Together, through science, through the plurality of knowledges, cosmologies, Your Excellency, as you noted, to face with faith, with hope, optimism, the solutions to move us from the current crisis to a moment of humane resilience. We are so grateful for your synthesis, for your presence, for your wisdom. Thank you, Excellency. I now invite Joaquin, my brother from Germany. Germany is becoming the new Miami here with the temperatures just amazing. Spend a lot of time in Germany and I can't imagine 40 degrees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. Brotherhood is needed to move the agenda forward. Let me just highlight the key points which we must not forget. This is a political conference. It's not a feel-good conference because we came here and we leave here with a sense of urgency. Number one, don't forget to ask for the money we have learned. Increase climate finance for the support of locally led adaptation and resilience. Number two, promote the adoption of a universal protocol for resilience rooted in justice, science, and solidarity with a strong African voice in that. Establish a Pan-African Resilience Alliance that includes cities, youth, academia, faith-based organizations, and civil society. And ensure youth are formally included in all regional and global climate negotiations, including COP30, where the messages from this summit shall be heard, and include faith-based organizations. Colleagues, I ask you to stand now and get ready to clap with gratefulness to Iliana Ubalijoro from C4 ICRAF and her team. To Jacqueline Cardo from Jacqueline Cardo and the network of African Science Academies, which enriched us here. To His Excellency Archbishop Philip Agnolo and Cardinal Turkson for their wisdom. To Marcelo Orozco with his team, Matthew Fanlon, who is here, and our secretariat in the Vatican, who sent us all your invitations and so on. So Sister Miriam and Matthew need to be acknowledged, please. To Governor Otticelli for his wisdom and his imprint, which will resonate not only in our audience, but through Africa, please. To all session chairs, panelists, and participants, clap to yourself. You deserve it. And to the youth organizations, the World Scouting, the Ames Youth, the young professionals of agricultural development. And thank you and get home safely.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's some coffee served outside. So at your leisure, please, it's available for you. Also, there is a missing notebook as of yesterday from the table at the back from a gentleman called Hillary. So if by chance you went with a notebook that did not belong to you, please see Hillary at the back. Thank you.